Now, here in the UK, investors will be keeping a close eye on Downing Street this morning. In just a few hours' time, Prime Minister Gordon Brown is expected to call a general election for May 6th, officially starting a campaign that in reality is already in full swing. So let's get more on this now with Helen Coombs, pollster for Ipsos-Mori. And Helen, the economy has really continued to dominate the political landscape in the UK. It's the defining issue in this election and will determine in large part who people vote for. So which party has the upper hand on that right now?
Well, as you say, I mean, yes, the economy is the most important issue facing Britain for most people, and a third of people say it's going to be the issue that's most important in helping them to decide how to vote. But the thing we're seeing is that none of the major parties has a real lead on the economy. The Conservatives lead by 3 points over Labour, but that isn't really enough to make a difference. So I think there's still all to play for in terms of dealing with the economy and managing public finances.
If we look at this in just a little more detail, we've seen an escalating row brewing over the past few days over tax and spending. Some are saying that this may have been something of a turning point, perhaps bolstering the position of the Conservatives, who have promised to reverse half of next year's 1% tax rise in national insurance. Any indications that the Conservatives may just have seized back the initiative?
Well, I think you have to remember that the public are far behind, like, the political classes and the politicians in terms of where they think, how they think that the public deficit should be dealt with. We know that 2/3 of the public still think that efficiencies can do it. So there is a reluctance to accept that cuts are needed, although we have seen a change since the summer that there's going to be some swift action necessary. But I think it's still, the people are still undecided and are quite cautious about what they want to see happen. So I think the Conservatives have definitely got the initiative now, but we're yet to see whether that's going to really resonate with the public.
As you say, the UK's mounting budget deficit will be a top priority whichever party wins, if any one party wins. How do people feel about cuts to public spending?
Well, we know that there's a real desire to keep, frontline services ring-fenced, such as health, education, the NHS in particular. But we do know that there's a growing realisation that cuts are going to be needed and that there are going to be some difficult decisions to make. So I think the public are catching up, for sure.
So most people think that efficiencies in public services will save enough to pay off the national debt, I think, from what you're saying. But yeah, would you say there is more acceptance now than there was a few months ago that there will be a need for cuts to public services as well?
Yes, I think there is. I think we asked the question in June, about whether cuts are going to be needed to public services, and I think only a third of people said that they thought they would be necessary, but now we're seeing more like half of the public agreeing that cuts are going to be necessary. When we ask also about how quickly cuts should be made, however, we do see that more people think that cuts should be made slowly and cautiously, so as not to impede economic recovery, than straight away. So in that sense, I think people are more in favour of the Labour approach of slightly more caution over cuts.
OK, and very briefly, Helen, you've got about 20 seconds on this one. What about the prospect of a hung parliament? How much concern is there that the UK may be heading for that, which, as Conservative leader David Cameron says, could be extremely damaging for the economy?
Yeah, I think people do think there's going to be a hung parliament. That's what people expect, and they think it is going to be damaging. So I think people definitely feel that, and that's both nationally and in the marginal constituencies. So I think there are high expectations that will be the outcome of the election.
Helen Coombs, thanks very much.